December 18th, 2024. 3 years. That's how long I'd been with Jennifer Morrison. 3 years of what I thought was building something real, something lasting. Tonight was supposed to celebrate that milestone at Marcello's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown where we had our first date. I'd made reservations 2 months in advance and requested the same corner table by the window overlooking the city lights. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Marcus Coldwell, a software engineer at a tech startup in Seattle. Not rich, but comfortable. I've always believed in working hard and treating people right. My parents raised me that way, in our small town in Oregon, before I moved to the city for college. Jennifer came from money. Her father owned a chain of car dealerships across Washington state. When we met at a mutual friend's birthday party, I was drawn to her confidence, her laugh, the way she seemed to light up every room she entered. The velvet box sat heavy in my jacket pocket as I drove to pick her up from her downtown apartment. Inside was a white gold ring with a single diamond, not massive but quality. I'd saved for 8 months, working extra freelance projects on weekends. The jeweler assured me it was perfect. "She'll love it," he'd said with a knowing smile. Jennifer slid into the passenger seat wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, and her perfume filled the car, something expensive and floral that she special ordered from France. "You look beautiful," I said, leaning over to kiss her cheek. She barely glanced at me, her attention fixed on her phone. "Thanks. Can we stop by Olivia's place real quick? She wants to see my new purse." "We have reservations in 20 minutes, I reminded her gently. She sighed dramatically. "Fine. Whatever." The drive to Marcello's was quiet, except for the constant clicking of her manicured nails against her phone screen. I tried to ignore the small knot forming in my stomach. Jennifer had been distant lately, always on her phone, always busy with her friends. I told myself it was just stress from her job at her father's company, where she worked in marketing, though worked might be generous. She mostly posted on their social media accounts and attended lunch meetings. When we arrived, the hostess led us to our table. The restaurant glowed with amber lighting from vintage fixtures, and a pianist played soft jazz in the corner. Other couples leaned close over candlelit tables, laughing and talking. "I'd hoped we'd be like them tonight. Wine?" I asked as we sat down. "Obviously," Jennifer said, still scrolling through her phone. "Get the expensive one. It's our anniversary." I ordered a bottle of Chianti the waiter recommended. As he poured our glasses, I noticed Jennifer's eyes never left her screen. She was smiling at something, typing rapidly. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just Olivia." She said quickly, finally setting the phone face down on the table. We ordered our meals. She got the lobster ravioli, the most expensive item on the menu, while I chose the chicken piccata. As we waited for our food, I tried to engage her in conversation about the memories we'd made over the past 3 years. "Remember our trip to Portland? Remember when we got lost hiking and ended up at that little diner? Remember our first Christmas together?" She gave short, distracted answers to everything. Yeah, that was fun, sure." Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Each time, she glanced at it with barely concealed eagerness. "Jennifer," I said finally, "can we just have one dinner without the phone?" She looked up, irritation flashing across her face. "What's your problem? I'm here, aren't I?" "Physically, yes. But you've barely looked at me since I picked you up." She rolled her eyes. "Here we go, the 'you're always on your phone' speech. I'm sorry, I have friends who actually want to talk to me, Marcus." The words stung, but I swallowed my response. Tonight was supposed to be special. I reached into my pocket, feeling the velvet box. Maybe once I gave her the ring, things would change. She'd see how serious I was about us, about our future. Our food arrived, and we ate in tense silence. I watched her push the expensive ravioli around her plate, taking small bites while continuously glancing at her phone. The pianist switched to playing "The Way You Look Tonight," and I remembered how Jennifer and I used to dance in her apartment kitchen to old jazz songs. When did we stop doing that? After the waiter cleared our plates, I ordered tiramisu for us to share, her favorite dessert. This was the moment. I reached into my jacket pocket, my fingers closing around the small box. My heart hammered against my ribs. Jennifer's eyes tracked my movement. For the first time all evening, she looked fully present, alert. A smile spread across her face as she saw the shape of the box in my hand. "Marcus," her voice pitched higher, suddenly animated. She sat up straighter, smoothing her hair. I pulled the box halfway out, feeling its weight, thinking about all those weekend hours I'd worked for this moment. But as I looked at her face, the way her eyes fixated on the box rather than on me, the calculating gleam in her expression, something made me pause. Her phone buzzed again. Without thinking, her hand shot out to grab it. She glanced at the screen, and I saw it clearly this time. A message preview from someone named Dylan with a heart emoji next to the name. The message read, "Can't wait to see you later, babe." Time seemed to slow down. The restaurant noise faded to a distant hum. I watched Jennifer's face as she read the message, watched a small, secretive smile play at the corners of her lips before she remembered I was sitting across from her. She quickly flipped the phone over, but it was too late. "Who's Dylan?" I asked quietly. Her face flushed. "What? Nobody. Just a guy from work. A guy from work who calls you babe and can't wait to see you later." "You're being paranoid," she snapped, but her eyes darted away from mine. "Are you going to give me my gift or what?" I looked down at the velvet box in my hand, then back at her. 3 years. 8 months of saving. All those times she'd been too busy or out with Olivia suddenly took on new meaning. The distance, the phone obsession, the way she'd stopped saying "I love you" unless I said it first. Slowly, deliberately. I placed the box back in my pocket. Jennifer's expression transformed from anticipation to confusion to anger in rapid succession. "What are you doing?" "It's our anniversary." "I know what day it is," I said calmly, though my heart was breaking. Her voice rose, carrying across the quiet restaurant. "Why didn't you buy me a gift?" Other diners turned to look. The pianist missed a note. Our waiter froze mid-step. I met her eyes, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time in months. "I did buy you a gift, Jennifer. I saved it for someone faithful." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Jennifer's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock, embarrassment, then rage. She slammed her hand on the table, making the wine glasses tremble. "Excuse me?" Her voice cut through the restaurant like a knife. "What is that supposed to mean?" I kept my voice level, conscious of every eye in the restaurant now watching our table. "I think you know exactly what it means. Dylan sends his regards, by the way." She grabbed her phone protectively, clutching it to her chest. "You're being ridiculous. Dylan is just a friend. Friends don't call each other babe. Friends don't send messages about meeting up later on your anniversary with your boyfriend." I stood up, pulling out my wallet. "I'm going to pay the bill. You can either wait here or find your own way home." "Marcus, sit down. You're making a scene." Her eyes darted around at the other diners, her cheeks burning red under her perfectly applied makeup. "I'm making a scene." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You've been cheating on me, Jennifer." "For how long?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For once she seemed at a loss for words. Then her expression hardened into something ugly, something I'd never seen before. "You know what your problem is, Marcus? You're boring. You're predictable. Every Friday it's the same Italian place or Thai food. Every Saturday it's hiking or some free museum. When was the last time you took me somewhere exciting? When was the last time you surprised me with something expensive just because?" Each word was designed to wound, and they found their mark. "I took you to Victoria for your birthday last year. We spent a week in San Francisco, with budget airlines and Airbnbs," she spat. "Dylan takes me to real restaurants. He bought me a bracelet last week that cost more than your entire wardrobe. He drives a BMW, not some 10-year-old Honda. There it was. The truth, finally bare and ugly between us. This wasn't about me being boring or predictable. This was about money, status, the things her father's wealth had taught her to value above everything else." "How long?" I asked again. She hesitated, then shrugged with practiced indifference. 4 months, maybe 5. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 5 months. Almost half a year of lies. I thought back to all the times she'd cancelled plans, all the girls' nights with Olivia, all the times she'd stayed late at her father's office. The betrayal sat in my stomach like stones. Does Olivia even exist, or is that just your cover story? Of course Olivia exists, Jennifer snapped. She's been covering for me, if you must know. She thinks you're boring too. I nodded slowly, processing this. The waiter approached cautiously, clearly uncomfortable with the domestic drama unfolding at table 7. Just the check. Please, I said quietly. He practically ran back to the register. Jennifer's phone buzzed again. Without thinking, she looked at it, and I saw another message from Dylan flash across the screen. Did you tell him yet? Tell me what? My voice came out harder than I intended. She bit her lip, and for a moment I saw something that might have been guilt flicker across her features. But it vanished quickly, replaced by defiance. Dylan proposed to me last week. I said yes. The restaurant seemed to tilt. I gripped the back of my chair to steady myself. You said yes. To marry someone else. While you were still with me, I was going to tell you tonight, actually. She lifted her chin. I was going to break up with you after dinner. But then I saw you had a gift, and I thought... She stopped herself. You thought what? That you'd take whatever I was giving you before dumping me. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. That's why you agreed to this dinner. That's why you got all dressed up. You wanted to see what I got you first. She didn't deny it. The waiter returned with the check. I threw down my credit card without looking at the total. At this point, I didn't care. Dylan's father owns a venture capital firm, Jennifer continued, as if explaining her reasoning would somehow make it better. We're getting married in June at his family's estate in Napa Valley. The ring he gave me is 3 carats. She pulled out her other hand from under the table. And there it was, a massive diamond that caught the restaurant's amber lighting and threw it back in brilliant refractions. She'd been wearing it the entire dinner, hidden from my view. Something inside me cracked. Not broke. I'd already broken when I saw that first message from Dylan. This was different. This was the final piece of whatever we'd had together crumbling into dust. Congratulations, I said flatly. I hope you'll be very happy together. I signed the receipt when it arrived, not bothering to calculate the tip beyond scratching in 20% automatically. As I stood to leave, Jennifer grabbed my wrist. Wait, what was in the box? Her eyes fixed on my jacket pocket with undisguised curiosity. What were you going to give me? I looked down at her hand on my wrist, the hand with Dylan's ring catching the light, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just an empty space where 3 years of my life used to be. It doesn't matter anymore, I said, gently removing her hand. Enjoy your evening, Jennifer. I hope Dylan knows what he's getting into. I walked out of Marcello's into the cold December night. Behind me, I could hear Jennifer calling my name, but I didn't turn around. The valet brought my Honda, my boring, reliable, 10-year-old Honda that had never let me down, and I tipped him $5 I couldn't really afford. As I drove through Seattle's rain-slicked streets, my phone started buzzing. Jennifer, probably. I ignored it. At a red light, I pulled out the velvet box and opened it. The diamond caught the streetlight, glittering like a tiny captured star. 8 months of weekend work. 8 months of sacrifice and planning and hope. For someone who'd been wearing another man's ring the entire time, I snapped the box shut and tossed it into my glove compartment. The light turned green, and I drove toward my apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, that small one-bedroom place with the leaky faucet I kept meaning to fix. It wasn't much, but it was mine, paid for with my own money, my own work. When I got home, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, all from Jennifer. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the cheap whiskey I kept for bad days, sat on my second-hand couch, and stared at the city lights through my window. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Jennifer. It was my best friend, Trevor Patterson, who I'd known since college. Dude, I just saw on Instagram that Jennifer posted she's engaged. What the hell happened? I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, long story. Can we grab breakfast tomorrow? Absolutely. Billy's Diner at 9. Perfect. I set my phone to silent and finished my whiskey. Tomorrow I'd talk to Trevor, figure out what to do with the ring, maybe start processing what had just happened. But tonight I just sat in the silence of my boring, predictable apartment and felt grateful that I'd seen Jennifer's true colors before I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The velvet box sat in my glove compartment. Waiting for someone who would actually deserve what was inside, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and a pounding headache. For about 3 blissful seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. The restaurant, Dylan's messages, the 3-carat ring Jennifer had been hiding under the table. My phone showed 68 unread messages. I scrolled through them with morbid curiosity. Most were from Jennifer, progressing from defensive to angry to pleading. A few were from numbers I didn't recognize, probably her friends joining the campaign. One was from her father, Richard Morrison, which surprised me. We'd only met twice in 3 years, both times at his annual company barbecues, where he'd barely acknowledged my existence. Marcus, Jennifer tells me there was an incident last night. Call me when you can. We should talk. I deleted it without responding. The last message had come in at 2:47 a.m. from Jennifer. You humiliated me in front of everyone. That restaurant posted about us on their Facebook. This is all your fault. I opened Facebook out of curiosity, something I rarely did anymore. Sure enough, Marcello's had a post from late last night. Even on the hardest nights, love finds a way. To the gentleman at table 7 who walked away with his dignity, we're rooting for you. Your meal is on us next time. The real love, the know your worth. The post had over 3,000 likes and hundreds of comments. I scrolled through them feeling surreal. Strangers from all over Seattle were offering support, sharing their own cheating stories, calling Jennifer every name in the book. Someone had apparently recognized her and tagged her Instagram account in the comments. Her profile had been set to private since then. I closed the app. This wasn't the vindication I wanted. I just wanted to move on. Billy's Diner was a greasy spoon near the University District, where Trevor and I had spent countless hungover Sunday mornings during college. I arrived at 8:55 to find my friend already in our usual corner booth, 2 coffees waiting. Trevor stood up and pulled me into a bear hug. At 6'3" and built like the linebacker he'd been in high school, Trevor gave hugs that could crack ribs. But right then, I needed it. Man, I'm so sorry, he said as we sat down. Tell me everything, so I did. I walked him through the entire evening, the distant car ride, the restaurant tension, the messages from Dylan, Jennifer's confession about the engagement. Trevor listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. 4 months, he finally said. She was cheating for 4 months and still stringing you along? 5, actually. She said maybe 5. I took a long drink of coffee. The worst part, she admitted she only agreed to the anniversary dinner because she thought I'd give her something expensive before she dumped me. That's sociopathic. Trevor shook his head. And the ring? Please tell me you returned it, still in my glove compartment. I'll take it back this week. Our waitress, an older woman named Diane, who'd been working at Billy's since before we were born, came over with a pot of fresh coffee. You boys eating or just drinking? The usual for both of us, Trevor said. She nodded and headed back to the kitchen. The usual meant Denver omelets, hash browns, and enough bacon to clog an artery. Comfort food. So what are you going to do? Trevor asked. About what? About Jennifer blowing up your phone. About her dad wanting to talk. About the fact that her Instagram followers are probably planning your murder as we speak. I hadn't thought about that last part. Jennifer had over 50,000 followers. She'd built her profile around being a lifestyle influencer, posting carefully curated photos of expensive brunches, designer handbags, and tropical vacations. Her engagement to Dylan was probably already announced to her followers, with some perfectly filtered photo and a caption about finding her soulmate. "I'm blocking her number," I said. "And her dad's, and anyone else who wants to involve themselves in this mess." "Good." Trevor leaned forward. "Listen, I need to tell you something. I probably should have said it months ago, but I didn't want to overstep." Something in his tone made me set down my coffee cup. "What?" "I saw Jennifer at a bar in Belltown back in August. She was with some guy, tall, expensive suit, looked like he'd never worked a day in his life. They were pretty cozy, lots of touching, definitely more than friendly. August. That was 4 months ago, right around when Jennifer said things with Dylan started. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, though I wasn't angry. "Just tired. Because I wasn't 100% sure," Trevor said. "Maybe it was innocent, maybe I was wrong about what I was seeing. And honestly, you seemed happy. You were always talking about this anniversary dinner you were planning, about the ring you were saving for. I didn't want to blow up your life based on something I might have misread." I nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I don't think you misread anything." Diane returned with our food, the plates piled high with enough calories to fuel a marathon. We ate in silence for a few minutes, and I let the familiar comfort of greasy diner breakfast work its magic. "Can I ask you something?" Trevor said eventually. "What were you feeling when you put that ring back in your pocket? When you realized you weren't going to propose?" I thought about it, remembering that moment of crystalline clarity at the restaurant. "Relief," I said finally. "Is that weird?" I was heartbroken and angry and betrayed, but underneath all of that was this massive sense of relief. Like I'd been about to jump off a cliff and someone grabbed my arm at the last second. "That's not weird at all," Trevor said. "That's your gut telling you what your brain already knew. You deserve better than Jennifer Morrison and her 3-carat consolation prize." We finished breakfast, and Trevor insisted on paying. As we stood in the parking lot saying goodbye, he grabbed my shoulder. "Take some time. Process this. Feel whatever you need to feel. But don't let her make you cynical, Marcus. Don't let this poison your idea of what relationships should be." "I'll try," I said, meaning it. I drove home through Seattle's late morning traffic, past the coffee shops and bookstores and street musicians that made the city feel alive. My phone was still blowing up. Jennifer had apparently moved on to emailing me, but I was getting better at ignoring it. When I got back to my apartment, I found a package waiting outside my door. No return address, but my name was written in Jennifer's distinctive looping handwriting. Against my better judgment, I brought it inside and opened it. Inside was a shoebox filled with everything I'd ever given her over 3 years. Birthday cards, a watch I'd saved for, ticket stubs from concerts, a pressed flower from our first hike together, even the cheap wooden bracelet I'd bought her at a craft fair during our Portland trip. Everything was carefully collected and returned, as if erasing every trace of our relationship from her life. But at the bottom of the box, under all the memories I'd thought meant something, was a note on her monogrammed stationery. "Marcus, you were right. I wasn't faithful. But you were also boring, cheap, and going nowhere. Dylan can give me the life I deserve. Vacations in Europe, a house in the right neighborhood, connections that actually matter. Your little ring probably cost 2 months of your salary. Dylan's cost more than your car. That's the difference between you and a real man. Don't contact me again. Jennifer." I read it twice, waiting for the anger to hit. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt something else, gratitude. Gratitude that I'd seen who she really was before legally binding myself to her. Gratitude that I still had the ring. Gratitude that my boring, predictable life was mine to live however I wanted. I took the note and threw it in the trash, shoebox and all. Then I pulled out my laptop and composed an email to my boss, requesting the vacation days I'd been hoarding for the past year. 2 weeks starting immediately. I had a ring to return and a life to rebuild. But first, I was going to take Trevor's advice and feel everything I needed to feel. The anger would come eventually. The sadness was already there, lurking at the edges. But right now, sitting in my small apartment with my cheap furniture and my decade-old Honda parked outside, I felt something Jennifer's 3-carat ring could never buy. I felt free. Monday morning, I walked into Brennan & Sons Jewelers with the velvet box in my pocket, feeling like I was carrying a weight I couldn't wait to put down. The store was in downtown Seattle, tucked between a Starbucks and a boutique selling handmade leather goods. I'd passed it 100 times before that day, 8 months ago, when I finally walked in with purpose. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. The same elderly jeweler who'd helped me, Arthur Brennan, according to his name tag, looked up from behind the counter where he was examining something through a loop. "Good morning. How can I—" He stopped mid-sentence when he recognized me. "Mr. Caldwell, isn't it? How did the proposal go?" I pulled out the box and set it on the glass counter between us. It didn't. His expression shifted from cheerful to concerned in an instant. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Would you like to sit down?" We moved to a small sitting area at the back of the store, away from the sparkling display cases. Arthur brought me a glass of water without asking, which told me this wasn't the first time he'd had this conversation. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" His voice carried genuine concern, not just the professional courtesy of someone protecting a sale. So I told him. Not everything, the story was getting exhausting to repeat, but the essential facts. The anniversary dinner, the messages from another man, the revelation that she'd been engaged to someone else the entire evening. Arthur listened, nodding occasionally, his weathered face grave. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "In 53 years of selling engagement rings," he said finally, "I've learned to read people pretty well. When you came in here last March, you had this determination about you. You knew exactly what you wanted, but you were worried about the price. You asked me 3 times if I was sure the payment plan wouldn't accrue interest," I remembered. "I'd been paranoid about hidden fees, about getting in over my head financially. I told my wife about you that night," Arthur continued. "I said, 'Maureen, I met a young man today who's doing this the right way. Working hard, saving honestly, thinking about the future. You reminded me of myself 40 years ago.' 'Thank you,' I said. Not sure where he was going with this. My point is, Mr. Caldwell, that ring represents something important. Not just the money, though Lord knows 8 months of weekend work is significant. It represents your character. The fact that you walked away when you realized she wasn't worthy of it. That shows you have a compass that points true north." His words landed heavier than I expected. I'd been so focused on feeling betrayed and foolish that I hadn't thought about it that way. "Now," Arthur said, standing up with surprising energy for a man who had to be pushing 80, "let's talk about the return. Normally, custom orders like this aren't refundable. Store policy. But these aren't normal circumstances." My heart sank. I'd been counting on getting at least some of that money back. "However," he continued, returning to the counter and examining the ring again through his loop, "I'm the owner, which means I can make exceptions. This is a quality piece, and I can resell it easily. I'll give you a full refund, minus a 10% restocking fee. Does that work for you?" The relief was immediate and physical. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you." As Arthur processed the paperwork, the bell chimed again. A young couple entered, probably in their mid-20s, holding hands and practically glowing with excitement. They reminded me of how Jennifer and I must have looked 3 years ago, full of hope and plans and certainty about the future. "We're looking for engagement rings," the young man announced, his voice slightly nervous. "Congratulations," Arthur said warmly. "Give me just a moment to finish with this gentleman, and I'll be right with you." The couple drifted toward the display cases, whispering and pointing. The young woman squeezed her boyfriend's hand every time she saw something she liked. "Here we are," Arthur said, handing me a check. $8,700. The full amount minus 10%. I stared at the check. 8 months of work, reduced to numbers on paper. But it was done. I could move on. "Mr. Caldwell," Arthur said quietly, glancing at the young couple, "may I give you some unsolicited advice from an old man who's been married for 47 years? Please, the right person won't care if the ring costs $800 or $8,000. Maureen's engagement ring was a simple gold band with a chip of a diamond, all I could afford back then. She still wears it every day, even though I've offered dozens of times to upgrade it." He smiled at the memory. "She tells me it's perfect because it represents who we were when we started, young and broke and wildly in love." Something in my chest loosened. "Thank you, Arthur. Got everything." We shook hands, and I left the store feeling lighter than I had in days. The young couple was now at the counter, the woman trying on different rings while her boyfriend watched with obvious adoration. I hoped they'd make it. I hoped they'd prove that love didn't have to end like mine did. Outside, Seattle was having one of its rare December days where the sun actually broke through the clouds. I stood on the sidewalk, check in my pocket, and realized I had absolutely no plans. No girlfriend to meet for lunch, no anniversary dinners to plan, no weekends blocked off for couples activities with Jennifer's friends. My phone buzzed. For once, it wasn't Jennifer. It was my younger sister Casey, calling from Portland where she still lived near our parents. "Hey," I answered. "Hey, yourself." Mom told me what happened. "Are you okay?" Mom, right. I'd sent a brief text to my parents yesterday explaining that Jennifer and I had broken up. I'd kept it vague, not wanting to worry them with the details. "I'm getting there," I said honestly. "Just returned the ring, actually." Good. She didn't deserve it. Casey had never particularly liked Jennifer, though she'd been polite enough at family gatherings. "Listen, I know this is last minute, but I'm driving up to Seattle this afternoon. Client meeting tomorrow morning. Want to grab dinner tonight?" "Yeah," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "That sounds great. 7 o'clock? That Thai place you're always talking about?" "Perfect." After we hung up, I realized I was smiling. When was the last time I'd had dinner with my sister without Jennifer there, making passive-aggressive comments about Casey's career choice? She was a public defender, or checking her phone constantly. I decided to walk home instead of taking the bus, letting the rare Seattle sunshine soak into my bones. The city looked different somehow, sharper and more alive. Street performers played guitar on corners. Coffee shops bustled with the lunch crowd, and Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual chaotic energy. On impulse, I stopped at a bookstore I'd always meant to visit but never had time for. Jennifer hated bookstores. She said they smelled musty and reading was boring when you could just watch the movie. I spent an hour browsing, finally leaving with 3 novels I'd been wanting to read, and a graphic novel the clerk enthusiastically recommended. When I got home, I deposited Arthur's check using my phone, watching my account balance jump back to something almost respectable. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my laptop and looked at flight prices. Jennifer had always wanted to go to Paris, Rome, Barcelona, cities where she could take Instagram photos and shop at designer stores. Every vacation we'd taken had been planned around her aesthetic. But there were places I'd wanted to see too, places I'd quietly set aside because they didn't fit her vision. I pulled up flights to Alaska. I'd always wanted to see the northern lights, to visit glaciers, to experience true wilderness. Jennifer had called it boring and cold whenever I mentioned it. The prices weren't bad for January. 2 weeks in Anchorage and Fairbanks, with a side trip to Denali National Park. I sat there with my cursor hovering over the purchase button, thinking about Jennifer's note. Boring, cheap, going nowhere. Maybe she was right. Maybe choosing Alaska over Europe was boring. Maybe staying in youth hostels instead of 5-star hotels was cheap. Maybe my career as a software engineer at a startup instead of a tech giant meant I was going nowhere. Or maybe, and this felt revolutionary as the thought formed, maybe I was exactly where I needed to be, living a life that was mine instead of one curated for someone else's approval. I clicked purchase. The confirmation email arrived instantly. 2 weeks in Alaska, departing January 15th, solo trip. Adventure for one. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't felt since before the restaurant, anticipation for the future. My phone buzzed with a text from Casey. "Running early. Want to meet at 6:30 instead?" "See you then," I replied. I had 2 hours to kill. I picked up one of my new books, settled onto my second-hand couch, and started reading. No one interrupted me. No one told me I was being boring. No one checked their phone constantly while I tried to explain the plot. It was, I realized, absolutely perfect. Casey arrived at my apartment at 6:15, characteristically early. She burst through the door with her usual energy, her dark curly hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a Portland Trail Blazers hoodie that had seen better days. At 28, 3 years younger than me, my sister had always been the rebel of the family, choosing public service over profit, thrift stores over boutiques, authenticity over appearance. "You look terrible," she said, which in Casey speak meant she was worried. "Thanks. You look like you just rolled out of a gym bag." Accurate. She dropped her backpack by the door and pulled me into a hug. And like Trevor's rib-crushing embraces, Casey's hugs were fierce but comfortable, smelling like her usual combination of coffee and lavender shampoo. "Seriously, though, how are you holding up?" "Better than yesterday. Worse than I'll be tomorrow, probably." I grabbed my jacket. "Ready for Thai food?" Siam Palace was a 10-minute walk from my apartment, a family-owned place that had been serving authentic Thai cuisine for 20 years. The owner, a grandmother everyone called Mama, knew my order by heart. Penang curry, medium spice, extra vegetables. We settled into a corner booth, and Casey ordered the drunken noodles, while I went with my usual. Once Mama had brought our Thai iced teas and disappeared back to the kitchen, Casey leaned forward with her elbows on the table. "Okay, now give me the real story. Mom said you and Jennifer broke up, but I know there's more to it." So I told her everything. The whole saga, from the anniversary dinner to Arthur's advice at the jewelry store that morning. Casey listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally something that looked almost like satisfaction. "I never liked her," Casey said when I finished. "I know I tried to be polite at Thanksgiving and Christmas, but Marcus, she was awful to you." "What do you mean? You seriously didn't notice?" Casey shook her head. "Every time you'd suggest something, a movie, a restaurant, a topic of conversation, she'd shoot it down or ignore you. Remember last Christmas, when you were telling that story about your project at work, the one you were excited about? She literally yawned in the middle of it and started scrolling through Instagram. I did remember that, actually. I'd felt embarrassed and had stopped talking mid-sentence. Jennifer had later told me that tech stuff was boring at family gatherings. And the way she talked about your job," Casey continued, her voice heating up, "like you were some kind of failure because you worked at a startup instead of Microsoft or Amazon. You're a software engineer, Marcus. You're building something meaningful." But she made it sound like you were unemployed and living in Mom and Dad's basement. Our food arrived, giving me a moment to process. Had Jennifer always been like this? Or had I just been so infatuated that I'd ignored the red flags? "The worst part," Casey said, stabbing at her noodles, "was watching you change for her. You used to be this guy who'd try anything. Remember when we went kayaking and you flipped in the rapids and just laughed about it? Or when you taught yourself guitar just because you wanted to learn? But with Jennifer you became so careful, like you were always walking on eggshells, trying not to bore her or disappoint her." Her words hit harder than I expected. She was right. Over 3 years, I'd gradually edited myself down, removing the parts Jennifer found tedious or unimpressive. The guitar had collected dust in my closet. I'd stopped suggesting activities I enjoyed if they weren't Instagram-worthy. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner," Casey added quietly. "I thought maybe I was being overprotective or jealous of your time. But Marcus, you deserve someone who actually likes you. Not the Instagram version or the potential high-earning version. Just you. When did my baby sister get so wise?" I asked, my throat tight. "I'm a public defender. I spend my days watching people make terrible decisions." "You develop pattern recognition," she grinned. "Plus, I read a lot of psychology books." "Comes with the territory." We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The restaurant filled up with the dinner crowd, families, couples, groups of friends laughing over shared plates. I watched them and felt something I hadn't expected: hope. All these people living their lives, most of them probably carrying their own heartbreaks and disappointments. Yet here they were, still showing up, still connecting, still finding reasons to smile. "So what's next for you?" Casey asked, pulling me from my thoughts. "I booked a trip to Alaska, 2 weeks in January." Her face lit up. "Seriously? You've been talking about Alaska since you were 16. Yeah, well, Jennifer always said it was too cold and boring. Jennifer thought anything without a Sephora was boring. Casey raised her glass. To Alaska, and to doing things just because you want to. We clinked our glasses together. And I felt a shift inside me, something fundamental realigning after being knocked off kilter for so long. After dinner, we walked back to my apartment through the crisp December evening. The Christmas lights were starting to appear on storefronts and trees, the city preparing for the holidays. It had always been my favorite time of year, though last Christmas with Jennifer had been stressful, endless shopping for expensive gifts, attending parties with her influencer friends where I never quite fit in, pretending to enjoy things that left me exhausted. "You want to come in for coffee?" I asked when we reached my building. "Can't. Early meeting tomorrow and I need to prep tonight." She hugged me again. "But Marcus, block her number. Block her friends. Block her dad. Anyone who's going to try to guilt you or manipulate you or make you feel like you did something wrong. You didn't. You dodged a bullet the size of a cruise ship." "Already done," I said. "Good. Love you, big brother. Call me if you need anything, okay? Even if it's 3 in the morning and you're spiraling. Love you too. Drive safe." I watched her walk to her car, a beat-up Subaru she'd named Beatrice, and felt grateful for family who actually cared about more than appearances and status symbols. Back in my apartment, I made myself tea and opened my laptop. My vacation request had been approved. My boss had simply replied, "Take all the time you need. You've earned it." I started researching Alaska excursions, dog sledding, glacier hiking, Northern Lights tours, ice fishing. Every option sounded incredible, nothing like the resort vacations Jennifer had always insisted on. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Against my better judgment, I checked it. It was from an unfamiliar address, but the subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth." I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. I opened it. "Marcus, my name is Stephanie Chen. You don't know me, but I've been dating Dylan Whitmore for the past 2 months. I just found out tonight that he's apparently engaged to someone named Jennifer Morrison and has been seeing her for months. I saw the post about you and Jennifer at Marcello's restaurant and put the pieces together. I thought you should know that Dylan has been cheating on his fiancée the entire time, with me and probably others. I'm sorry you got caught up in his and Jennifer's mess. They deserve each other." Stephanie, I read it 3 times, each time feeling a different emotion. First shock, then dark amusement, then something that felt almost like vindication. Jennifer had left me for Dylan, bragging about his money and his BMW and his 3-carat ring. And Dylan had been cheating on her the entire time. I should have felt happy about the karma. But mostly I just felt tired. This was what I'd escaped, a world of lies and betrayals, and people treating relationships like accessories to be swapped out when something shinier came along. I typed out a response. "Stephanie, thank you for telling me. I'm sorry you're dealing with this too. For what it's worth, you dodged a bullet as well. I hope you find someone who actually deserves you. Marcus." I hit send, then did something that felt monumentally freeing. I created a new folder in my email called Old Life and moved every message from or about Jennifer into it. Then I archived the folder where I wouldn't see it unless I went looking. Over the next few weeks, my life settled into a new rhythm. Work became more enjoyable, without the constant stress of trying to impress Jennifer or make enough money to fund her expensive tastes. I started playing guitar again, my fingers clumsy at first, but gradually remembering. Trevor and I established a standing Friday night gaming session, something I'd given up because Jennifer had deemed video games childish. I joined a hiking group that did weekend trips around Washington. On the first trip, a moderate climb up Rattlesnake Ledge, I met a woman named Sophie Hartman, who worked as a middle school science teacher. She wore practical hiking boots and carried her water in a dented Nalgene bottle covered in national park stickers. When she smiled, it reached her eyes. We ended up hiking together, talking about books and travel and the satisfaction of reaching a summit through your own effort. She'd been to Alaska 3 times and spent 20 minutes enthusiastically recommending places I should visit in January. Her excitement was infectious, genuine in a way that made Jennifer's performative enthusiasm seem hollow in retrospect. "Here," Sophie said at the summit, pulling out her phone. "Let me show you pictures from my last trip to Denali." She scrolled through photos of glaciers and wildlife and the northern lights dancing across the sky. No filters, no posed shots, just authentic moments of wonder captured and preserved. "These are incredible," I said. "You should be a photographer," she laughed. "I'm terrible at composition. I just point and shoot and hope for the best. But Alaska makes everything look good. It's impossible to take a bad picture there." When we reached the trailhead after the hike, Sophie asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. Not in a date way, at least I didn't think it was a date way, just as fellow hikers who'd enjoyed the conversation. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. Christmas came and went. I spent it in Portland with my parents and Casey, eating Mom's traditional lasagna and watching terrible holiday movies. Nobody mentioned Jennifer. Mom had been suspicious of her from the start. Mothers always know, and Dad had never quite understood what I saw in her. They were too kind to say, "I told you so," but the relief in their eyes told me everything. "You seem lighter," Mom said on Christmas Eve as we sat by their fireplace, just the two of us. Dad and Casey had gone to pick up dessert from the bakery. "Like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down." "I have," I admitted. "I just didn't realize how heavy it was until it was gone." She squeezed my hand. "Your father proposed to me with a ring he won at a carnival. Cost him $3 in game tickets. I said yes before he even finished asking. Dad's told me that story 100 times. The ring isn't the point, sweetheart. Neither is the money or the car or the house in the right neighborhood. The point is finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves what they find." She smiled. "That Jennifer girl never really saw you. She saw a project, something to shape into what she wanted. You deserve better than that." On New Year's Eve, I stayed home alone. Not because I didn't have invitations. Trevor had offered to include me in his party plans, and the hiking group was doing a midnight summit somewhere, but because I wanted to be alone. To sit with myself and reflect on the year ending and the one beginning. At 11:45 p.m., I pulled out my journal, something I'd started keeping after the breakup on Casey's recommendation. I wrote about the past year, about Jennifer, about the restaurant, about the ring I'd saved for someone who didn't deserve it. Then I wrote about the future I wanted, one built on authenticity instead of appearances, on genuine connection instead of performance, on being enough exactly as I was. When midnight struck, I stood on my small balcony watching fireworks explode over the Seattle skyline. My phone buzzed with New Year's messages from family and friends. One was from Sophie from the hiking group. "Happy New Year. See you on the trail in 2025. I smiled and typed back, "Happy New Year, looking forward to it." 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Anchorage. The woman in the seat next to me was reading a mystery novel. The man across the aisle was working on his laptop. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering drinks and snacks. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. And for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace being one of them. Alaska was everything I'd hoped for and more. The glaciers were massive and ancient, the wildlife abundant and unafraid, the northern lights dancing across the sky in ribbons of green and purple that no photograph could capture. I took a helicopter tour over Denali, went dog sledding with a musher who'd run the Iditarod, and spent an evening ice fishing with a guide who told stories about growing up in the wilderness. On my last night in Fairbanks, I sat in a hot spring under the stars, watching my breath steam in the negative 20-degree air. Other tourists chatted quietly, but I was content to be silent, just experiencing the moment without needing to document it or perform it or prove it happened. My phone was back at the hotel, deliberately left behind. Jennifer would have been horrified. How could you travel somewhere without posting about it? But I was learning that some experiences were meant to be lived, not broadcast. When I returned to Seattle, I felt different, settled. The wound Jennifer had left was still there. But it was healing clean instead of infected. I'd learned things about myself in Alaska, that I was capable of traveling alone, that I didn't need someone else to validate my experiences, that boring and predictable might actually be faithful and consistent. Sophie and I started hiking together regularly. After the fourth or fifth hike, she mentioned she was single. Her last relationship had ended because her ex wanted someone more glamorous than a middle school teacher who spent her free time hiking and camping. His loss, I said, and meant it. That's what my friends keep telling me. She adjusted her backpack straps. It's just hard to believe sometimes that being yourself is actually enough for someone, you know? I knew exactly what she meant. 3 months after Alaska, Trevor invited me to a concert, a band we'd both loved in college, but never got to see because Jennifer had always found reasons we couldn't go. I said yes immediately. The venue was small and loud, packed with people who actually cared about the music. We sang along to every song, our voices hoarse by the end, grinning like idiots. As the band played their final encore, Trevor leaned over and shouted over the music, "This is good to see, man." "You're back." He was right. I was back. Not the same as before, Jennifer. That version of me was gone. But someone new. Someone who'd learned that the right person wouldn't make you feel boring or cheap or like you weren't enough. The right person would appreciate trips to Alaska over trips to Paris, would value honesty over appearances, would choose substance over status. The ring I'd saved for 8 months was gone, sold to someone who hopefully would give it to someone who deserved it. But I didn't regret those 8 months of work. They taught me discipline, commitment, and ultimately the courage to walk away when something wasn't right. 6 months after the restaurant, I ran into Jennifer at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. She was with a group of women I recognized from her Instagram, perfectly styled hair, designer bags, phones out to capture every moment. She saw me at the same time I saw her. For a second, we just looked at each other. Then she stood and walked over, leaving her friends at their table. "Marcus," she said.
How are you?
"Good. Really good, actually. It wasn't a lie."
How are you?
"How's Dylan?" Something flickered across her face. "We broke up 3 months ago," I nodded, unsurprised after Stephanie's email. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not." She said it without malice, just stating a fact. "No," I agreed. "I'm not. I heard you went to Alaska. That must have been boring." There was no heat in her words, just habit. This was how we'd always spoken, her dismissing my interests, me absorbing the criticism. "It was incredible," I said simply. "Best trip of my life." She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before: regret. Not for cheating on me or lying to me, but for underestimating me. For throwing away something real for something shiny that had tarnished quickly. "I have to get back," she said finally. "It was good seeing you. Take care of yourself, Jennifer." I meant it. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't even feel angry. She was just someone I used to know, someone who taught me what I didn't want in life by showing me exactly what I did want. As I left the coffee shop, my phone buzzed. Sophie, asking if I wanted to join her for a sunset hike that evening. I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. See you at 6. The velvet box was gone. The ring was gone. 3 years of my life were gone. But I was still here, still moving forward, still learning who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone else's version of enough. And maybe that was the real gift all along, not the ring I'd saved for someone faithful, but the knowledge that I was worth more than someone who could never see my value. I walked out into the Seattle afternoon, the sun breaking through the clouds, and felt grateful for boring, predictable, faithful lives lived honestly. Mine was waiting for me, full of possibilities I'd never expected, and adventures I'd almost missed. The right person was still out there somewhere, maybe on a hiking trail or in a bookstore or sitting alone at a coffee shop. And when I found her, or she found me, I'd know her by this. She'd see me clearly, all my ordinary imperfections and quiet dreams, and she'd choose me anyway. Not for what I could buy her, or how I made her look, or what status I could provide, just for being myself. And that, we'd learned, was worth more than all the 3-carat rings in the world. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.